Crayfish party turns tragic. A man loses his arm to a crocodile. In the heart of Stockholm, an evening of celebration turned into a true horror story. It was August in 2019 at the famous Skansen Aquarium, which was hosting a traditional Swedish crayfish party. 79-year-old Lars Liedegren was a respected member of this gentleman's club. These gatherings happened every year and were full of good food and drink and lots of speeches from its members. As the hours went on, Mr. Liedegren was ready to take his turn. Mr. Liedegren sought a vantage point to deliver his speech. He looked around and saw a large, flat rock that was close to the crocodile enclosure. So he climbed on top of it and started to wave his arms around in order to get the attention of those who were there. He did succeed, and everyone quietened down to listen to him. He was happy and started talking about his area of expertise. As he continued, he began to relax and enjoy his performance, leaning on the 6.5 feet, 2-meter-high glass barrier. This barrier was there for a very good reason, because it protected the enclosure where 2 crocodiles lived. The height of this barrier was sufficient to protect anyone from these crocodiles. But Mr. Liedegren was standing on the very tall rock adjacent to it. As he was giving his speech, he leaned his left arm on the top of the barrier, and without realizing it, he had inadvertently let it dangle over the barrier. Within seconds, one of the crocodiles jumped up and grabbed hold of his arm. He screamed a blood-curdling sound as the animal clamped its jaws and was keeping hold of him. Witnesses stood in shock as the crocodile maintained its grip for what felt like an eternity, but was, in reality, about 10 seconds. The men at first were looking on in horror, with some of them overtaken with sheer panic. Once the crocodile let go of him, Mr. Liedegren fell to the ground, screaming in agony. Luckily for the injured man, there were some doctors at the gathering, and they took charge of the situation. They organized medical care by using napkins and whatever materials were at hand. They managed to stop the bleeding, providing critical first aid as they waited for the emergency services to arrive. Mr. Liedegren was rushed to the hospital, where doctors faced the daunting task of addressing his severe injuries. Despite their best efforts, the damage was too much, and his left arm above the elbow had to be amputated. For Liedegren, the journey to recovery was very challenging for him. After he spent 3 weeks in the hospital, he was discharged, but he spoke about his difficulty in coping with a disability and the phantom limb sensations that were always there. What about the crocodile at the center of this incident? It was one of a pair of Cuban crocodiles that had arrived at the Skansen Aquarium in 1981. Jonas Wallström, the aquarium's director, explained the animal's amazing journey. These animals were born in Cuba, and Fidel Castro sent them to Russia as a gift to the cosmonaut Vladimir Shatilov in 1978. They were tiny, and he brought them to his flat to be raised there. But after 3 years in the home, the animals were getting too big, so he offered them to the Moscow Zoo. But they did not have the right facilities to house them. So arrangements were made with Sweden to take the animals. Jonas Wallström was a zookeeper at the time, and so flew to Russia to collect the rare crocodiles. They were still very small, so he was able to take them on the plane as hand luggage. They were a breeding pair and were named Castro and Hillary. Over the years, they thrived and had 11 baby crocodiles since arriving there. Because Cuban crocodiles are an endangered species with a dwindling population, 10 of their offspring were sent back to Cuba in 2015. Therefore, they were contributing to conservation efforts for their critically endangered species. And here they were, over 40 years later, making headlines all over the world for the wrong reasons. The crocodile involved in the incident was not harmed. Instead, immediate measures were implemented to enhance visitor safety and prevent future tragedies. And both Castro and Hillary are still housed in Sweden and are continuing to breed happily. If you found this interesting, share and subscribe to see more animal stories.